Welcome back, everyone, to my round 6 recap from the St. Louis Masters. I finished my game not too long ago, and there's something very special about this game. I was playing Grandmaster Mahel Boyer from France, and I'll go ahead and say right now that I was prepared 22 moves deep into the opening in this game. I actually had the position after move 22 on my computer with Stockfish running right before the game. So let's get into it. I started with e4, and when it came to preparing for this opponent, he actually plays a lot of different things. So I was preparing against e6 and e5 and c5 and g6 and d5 and knight c6, another pet line of his. And he played d6, which I was not specifically preparing for on move 1. But because I was preparing against modern, we ended up transposing into my prep after d4, knight f6, knight c3. He plays g6. And normally I like to play these positions with my bishop on f4. I can very often get this position from a London move order. For anyone who watches my content on a regular basis, you may have seen me play these positions a lot with the quick kingside attack. And I realized during the game that it's very possible my opponent prepared specifically against my London and maybe was ready to enter this position. So I chose to deviate from what I usually do and put my bishop on e3. This is what I was preparing against the modern move order. And after bishop g7, queen d2, it's a very similar opening line where very often lines will transpose because white will end up playing bishop h6. And that's pretty much what happened. After c6, bishop h6, takes and takes. And one of the reasons why I prepared specifically this variation was I found a few of my opponent's chess.com games entering this line. And what I did was I checked what he's most likely to play and what Stockfish would do in response. And the next 15 moves on my part are all basically the top engine move from Stockfish. So going forward, he played e5, I castle, he plays queen e7, and I played bishop to e2. And this is really the first maybe new move I learned today right before the game. I don't recall studying this line. I will go ahead and say that Chessmood has a pretty extensive course against the Pierts and Modern, and it's very possible they cover this line, but most of my prep was done just using ChessBase. So maybe after this tournament, I'll go ahead and check the Chessmood course. Just as a side note, and maybe a small advertisement, if you want free access to Chessmood, you can use the link below, chessmood.com/Rosen. You can get a 7-day free trial, no payment info required. It's really just a great deal, and get access to some very deep opening prep if you want to see what they have in store. So going forward from here, my opponent plays knight d7. I continue f4. This is definitely the most confrontational approach. He plays b5. We trade a lot on e5. And in this position, I think it's important to know what Stockfish recommends because the move isn't super obvious. Pawn to h3. The point is preventing knight to g4. And there's a funny line here that if black plays b4, I would play knight a4. Black can take on e4, and then white has a very strong move, knight f3, allowing a fork on f2, but then queen g7, and white is completely winning. So this is one of the lines I checked before the game. My opponent did not go into that. He pretty quickly played bishop e6. I played knight f3. And another fun line I checked before the game was b4 in this position, after which I was ready to play knight d5. And Stockfish also gives a winning advantage for white in this line. But my opponent didn't do that. He played knight f d7. And I should note that my opponent was also moving pretty quickly. So he was also clearly still within his opening prep. I took on e5. He took on e5. And at first it looks like white's winning material after queen g7, attacking the undefended knight and rook. But black can save everything after queen g5 check, king b1, and king to e7, delayed pawn cloud, defending the rook on h8. And this is still opening prep. I blitz out pawn to h4, attacking his queen. He goes back to f6. I play queen h6. He plays g5. We're both pretty much blitzing. We did use some time earlier. I think my opponent used time trying to remember his prep. I also used a little bit of time trying to remember my prep. But after takes, still engine prep. And now the point is black cannot take on g5 because I have rook h5 to win the knight. If king f6 or f4, there's rook f1 check, and the knight's going to be lost. So because of that, black cannot take on g5. He had to play king e7, and I played bishop to f3. And this is where I stopped my preparation before the game. Maybe I would have gone deeper, but I had to check all the other openings that he could play. So this is really just the top engine line that I was lucky enough to be ready for. And I knew during the game, bishop f3 is the top engine move. I also knew that the stockfish evaluation is around plus 0.3 to plus 0.4 in white's favor. So I knew the advantage is not super big for white, but it's an advantage, and white is temporarily up a pawn, even though g-pawns are doubled and isolated. Maybe they're weak. But I thought that, okay, it's an opening success, and maybe I can try and grind down my opponent for a win. Now, he continued to blitz out rook a to g8, and he told me after the game he was around the end of his preparation as well at this point. He told me he remembered the idea of rook g7 and doubling and pressuring the g-pawn. So at this point I was on my own, but I played the most logical move in the position, defending my g-pawn. He played rook to g7, and I played knight e2. I figured this is a very logical way of improving the knight. The knight was not doing much on c3, and from e2 it can potentially go in to d4 or f4 and try and target various points in black's position. So he replies with rook hg8. I play knight to d4. And I'm going to go ahead and say that I did check this game with the engine, and apparently knight d4 was a missed opportunity. What I could have done in this position was play g6, and I was considering this because it attacks the knight, essentially forcing knight takes g6, and then there's a strong sequence, knight d4, rook c8, and then rook c5. I was trying to calculate this during the game. There's bishop d7 holding on to the pawn, e5, and knight h4, and I was trying to make sense of these lines where, okay, white's exerting pressure, but g2 is weak, and it was hard to evaluate. And one of the reasons why I didn't go for this line is I saw something that looked more attractive. Instead of g6, I play knight d4, he defends a pawn, and I play b4. And I thought this is a nice practical approach, just trying to clamp down on the queen side, but this was apparently just not the right approach, according to the engine, and given what happened in the game, as we're going to see. Now, I had a chance again to play g6, which I should have done, takes, and rook e1? I have the engine turned on here. It's giving rook e1, which maybe is a little bit hard to understand. I guess ideas knight f5 is a big threat with some potential fork and x-ray vision. Let me show what happened in the game. I played b4, and I thought I'm in good shape. The c-pawn is backwards. I'm guaranteeing control over the square, so black cannot easily play c5 to kick away my strong knight from d4. But he found a, I think, very accurate way of playing here. First, he takes on g5, so we trade g for h-pawn. And then he plays a very energetic move, pawn a5. And after he played this move, I realized that I'm under a bit of pressure. Of course, I can take his pawn, but if I do, then my a-pawns get doubled and very likely lose a pawn back. eventually with rook a8. And what I wanted to do was defend my b pawn with a3 or c3, but it's not so easy because if I play a3, there's knight c4, and a3 is a target, king a2, there's rook a8, or even takes and then rook a8. And if I play c3, I think similar things happen. There's takes, rook a8, and I'm under pressure here, and black has good compensation for being down a pawn. So after a bit of a think, I decided to take on a5, temporarily going up 2 pawns. But yeah, after rook a8, I'm losing a pawn back, and I couldn't figure out the best way to try and play for the edge here. I played rook dh1. Now it turns out in this position, I have a crushing idea, but it's very engine-like, and to be honest, I'm not sure if I would have found this move, even if I was told that like white has a huge advantage here. The best move is bishop h5, which I was aware of this resource to attack f7, but the main idea is to free the f3 square for the knight, and knight f3 is a very, very strong concept in this position. And if black, let's say, defends f7 again with bishop e6, then there's only one winning move for white, which again, I think is very hard for a human to find, rook h6. The point is threatening to take on e6, force black to take back with the pawn, and then go in with the rook check on the 7th rank. In some cases, the rooks can converge, and black doesn't really have time to take on a5, because after takes, rook h7, yeah, if king f8, there's a back rank mate. If king f6, rook f1, and black is losing material. There's no legal king move. So this was a missed opportunity. So yeah, it stings a little bit that I did not find this idea. Maybe if I considered bishop h5, maybe it's possible I can calculate these lines. But the move I played was rook dh1, and after rook takes a5, white really no longer has the advantage, even though I'm up a pawn. I have 4 pawn islands, 4 isolated pawns. I went for the rook trade, takes, king f6, and there's really nothing better here than to just check and repeat. And we agreed to a draw in this position. So maybe it's a little bit depressing that I was 22 moves prepared with engine, but so was my opponent. So more than half this game was stockfish opening prep, and I had my chance to be better. Yeah, engine points out a few moments where white was, I think, at least +1 or +2, right? Yeah, if I found bishop h5, it was +2. And then if I found g6 earlier, it was almost +2 as well. So definitely had my chance. But it's tough to beat grandmasters. Sometimes you only get one chance, and if you don't take it, then the opportunity fades away. But I think a draw is still a fine result. This puts me at 2.5 out of 6, so I'm on a -1 score. But all my opponents have been high rated. I've played 5 GMs and 1 IM with a couple GM norms. So really can't complain. Yeah, there's 3 more rounds to go. It's currently 7:46 p.m. St. Louis time. 2 more games tomorrow. So I'm not sure when this recap will be posted, but it's very possible that by the time this recap is posted, the tournament will be over. But I just want to say thank you, everyone, for watching these videos. I really hope you're getting some value out of them. In some sense, they're therapeutic for me to just process my games, share some lessons. And as usual, if you have any questions about any moments, feel free to leave them below. If you like the content, subscribing does help support the channel. And stay tuned for more. I'll see you guys soon.